All
This
right,
conference will
so
now
welcome
be
everybody.
recorded.
My name is Rebecca Antle. I'm the Youth Services Consultant for the South Carolina State Library. Thank you for joining us this morning. Our presentation today is going to be from Kathy Headley. She is the, are you current president or past president of ILA?
I just finished my presidential term June 30th, so I am now.
Okay, so just past president of the International Literacy Association, and she also is a professor of literacy at Clemson University. And Kathy, I'm going to turn it over to you and start the slideshow.
All right, terrific. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to this session. Now, I am also using this as my, so we've got the slides up here in a minute, I bet. Ah, there we go. We're getting going. All right, terrific, terrific. All right, I want to start with this too, with ILA, and give you a website that I'll have on one of the slides at the end. It's the www.worldwideliteracy, all one string, worldwideliteracy.org, and I'll be referring to that for some different sites that you'll want to take in for that. But wow, COVID-19 has really caused our International Literacy Association to talk about pivot. We've been moving and talking about change, but change came upon us immediately with COVID-19. So this spring and through June 30th, so many decisions. And as you know, from any organization, it's also importantly about content, but it's also about how do we share the content. So we've been working hard and fast with that. So June 30th, I was delighted at that point. I've had a good but challenging year with all of our COVID things going on. And we have another person who served as our superintendent of Lawrence 55, Stephen Peters, is now the current president. So he and I feel very strongly that ILA has been extremely rich with South Carolina. So I'm delighted to be here today with all of you and the headquarters as I talk to them about what we might want to share in an updated version since so many changes were taking place. So I think that's why I have enjoyed particularly looking at this presentation, one, being with all of you and having that opportunity, but two, to really ask for, okay, we're doing a lot of things, but what does that look like together? So hopefully this is going to get us there. Let me see if I get the slides. This will be the big moment. Drum roll. It didn't work for me. So let's go to the next one.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
Yes. There we go.
All right. And I put this slide in. My term was 1920, but I want to tell you a little bit about myself background-wise. I've been in education a long time. So I talk in decades and not years. I've been a classroom teacher. I came to Clemson as an assistant professor, never imagining that I would still be at Clemson. And I will have to say, we've had change across time and lots of opportunities. So as a literacy professor across my tenure there, I've also had the opportunity to do different things and wear different hats. And part of it's been for my college, was an associate dean for research, as well as shared services most recently for two colleges that we had. So working with education and also working with our college that serves health. So I've had a lot of experiences in that realm, but I've maintained my literacy background across time. So that was a pivotal point in working not only at ILA at the international level, but I have also served for a number of years with our state literacy organization. It used to be SCIRA. It's now the Palmetto State Association. There are changes there too. So I stay in contact. I don't have an office there now. They would certainly launch me, but I'm supportive of them in the background and continue to do so. So that's a little bit about who I am and what I do. So across time. Let me see, I'm going to try it one more time. Nope, you're going to need to, I guess, forward for me. There we go. All right, so the first here is what is ILA, and I know that most of you are very familiar with. I always think of our sister organization, NCTE, and a member of that as well. And there are differences and similarities. You probably have your own thoughts about that. I think they're organizationally set up differently, although ILA has changed across time. We're still very connected to states, as NCT is, but our connection is changing, and that has made a difference in terms of just the governance, as you can imagine. But the central piece that we have that ILA has stood next to, beside, and embraced is that we consider ourselves a professional home for literacy educators. Now, this includes researchers, teacher educators, classroom practitioners, reading specialists, literacy coaches, principals and other administrators, school librarians, and media specialists too. So we're very general in terms of our scope. Once upon a time, we considered that IRA several years ago might be more elementary based, and I always thought of NCTE as more secondary based. That's no longer the case at all for either organization. So those are two great professional homes, but today I wanted to talk with you a little bit about what ILA has defined itself in our changing times. We were already engaged. We'll go to the next slide. We were already engaged in a lot of consideration because we've been dealing with the fact that if we're an international organization, what does that mean? And truthfully, you know, we did more things state and nationally than we did internationally. There was certainly a network there and an avenue, but it was not as solid as we needed it to be. I think that the changes that we're doing with COVID-19 is going to strengthen that international aspect because, as you know, we're now sending out information across the board. So it's you know, hooking into the presentations, accessing information, and it's all done in terms of the internet. So that's a real strong piece for us for ILA. Sort of forced us into the change. We were going there, but our conference setup was, as you know, it was still primarily come attend the conference. Last fall, we were in New Orleans. We did give some of the connections to come in for certain sessions and view them via the internet, and that was our kind of moving into more of a virtual conference, layering it with the on-site. I guess that's sort of a nice metaphor here to think about our classes that we're going to have in the fall at Clemson. But we were, you know, COVID said you're going to have to step that up. We canceled our conference that would have been in Columbus, Ohio this year. We were really had it solidified. Things were moving absolutely forward with such strength, but COVID stopped it cold in the tracks. So pivot is the key word here for the change. And we had to look at the representation that we have and by the numbers, and these are the most recent numbers, that we are present in some form, some connection in 128 countries, that we are 70 plus years old in terms of the experience and the professionalism that we have, our network that we have. There's a presentation that was always a favorite of mine, and it's not updated. I actually considered pulling parts of it and putting in here, but it just shows the wealth of our people for these many years that have served in the leadership role. It's impressive in terms of the depth of the background, and so much of who we are is built upon that, with new, exciting professionals adding to the base. So those 70 plus years have really been phenomenal. We have at this time 24,000 members and counting. I think that we've dealt with, and you may, if your own organizations, our members changing. Who that membership happens to be and what they want is changing. And again, the virtual piece is going to, I think, be an asset in terms of, I'm going to talk with you later about the types of sessions that we will have for ILA that you can take advantage of. And for members, so many of them are free. So if you're not a member, there's a cost to it. So what ILA is doing is really ramping up those types of events and being able to say, here's what the benefits are for your membership has just increased tenfold and more. In terms of people around the world that are involved, now this includes members certainly, but there's a number of educators and other advocates who are part of our global network. So we're far-reaching, and that is increasing in more solid form as we take advantage again of the virtual types of professionalism. So we'll advance to the next slide. So what do we do? And that has been a piece that in this past year of leadership that our board, which consists of not only the officers and an executive director, Marcy Craig Post, but also we have 9 at-large board members who are elected. Everyone's elected for the board, except for, again, the executive director. So one of the things we grapple with is, what's our mission? We revisit that, but what are we about? Now, as board members, we learn quickly that we're not there just to think about presentations or to consider those types of roles, but instead it's much more of an overview of what's needed. And one of the things that we hear from our membership time and again is that we are the research to practice and looking at practice back to inform research. That's the main core of who we are. And it is the high quality research that makes a difference for our classrooms. That's the piece where we come together with administrators, classroom teachers, librarians, media specialists, administrators. It's a cumulative type of weaving together and what are the needs, and we try to be responsive to those needs. So we want to be sure that that dualness between research and practice, that it's not just a one way that we take research and translate to classroom, but we have that feedback coming back to our researchers from those classrooms so that we can stay relevant to the challenges and needs that we have. Next slide. Now, setting the standards. I don't know how many of you are working either at a university or certainly have connections with a university, but setting the standard as we move to the next slide, that's kind of the intro slide, so we'll get to the next one, is teacher preparation. I think it's going to be interesting. I'll give you a little promo for something I'm going to share later. I'm going to share with you some of the feedback and research that's done on topics for, it's called What's Hot. And one of the things that comes up in that data, which has a number of folks who've responded to it, is that we need to do a better job preparing our literacy professionals. And that always hits me pretty hard because, I feel very committed to that. I feel that we have quality programs, but what's happening when we get out into the classrooms and in the schools, and our classroom teachers in particular perhaps feel they have more challenges than they feel prepared to take on. And we have to take that very seriously, and ILA does. And one of the things that they're engaged in ongoingly happens to be that they prepare the professional standards for literacy professionals. And you'll notice this one says 217. Well, this is what is current here for 2020. The standards need to come out early in terms of the different programs at the universities, looking at these and applying it to their programs and collecting data to support their use of standards. And this will be incorporated into their accreditation process that may be part of the university. I know that CAPE is one that is utilized by a lot of the universities, as at Clemson too. ILA did work through CAPE. We now are a standalone in terms of our standards, because one of the things that we do is we pull together a representative group across the nation, really, because this is pretty much centric to the United States. And with these standards, then a lot of time is spent looking at the previous standards, updating for the current types of challenges and issues, putting out the revisions for feedback and critique, giving time for that, pulling back together for any changes and such. Now, internationally, we utilize this again for pulling the information that is again applies to the international aspect. So while it may be utilized in a different form for assessment, it certainly is internationally valuable as well. So historically, these standards have been for reading specialists and literacy coaches, but it has expanded now to include undergraduate programs that prepare elementary and intermediate classroom teachers. I want to stop for a minute here because this may be something that you're interested in or not interested in. I just want to open it up if there are any questions you want to add to the chat. This one is so unique to the university level. I want to just be sure before I move on, or even your thoughts about, you know, are we preparing our professionals as we should? I mean, this is a critical point, and ILA is very interested in where we should go next and what we should do. Any questions from the chat? Lee, look at that. I've even sent out a chat. Aren't we rolling? We go to meeting, aren't we? All right. I didn't want to just, you know, you can cover slides in about 10 minutes. And I thought, hey, we've got 14 people out there. I can at least stop for a moment, and I'm going to wait for a moment in case you have questions. So my last comment to you about this is that we've been interested in how will the standards be utilized in an independent way that may be much more programmatically in terms of program improvement and not just hooked into CAPE, which so many of the professional organizations are stepping back from CAPE itself and doing their standards as we have been doing. And we're working with programs individually. So
Kathy,
right now, yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but I did have a question. Can you tell us what CAPE is? Since you have a lot of public librarians who may not necessarily know that side of things. And then also, how useful would something like this be for public library staff person to look through? Would there be any helpful information in there for a lot of the pre-literacy work that we do as professionals?
So the first question I'll tackle is the CAPE, and I'm not going to be able to memorize what all those letters stand for, but so here's what happens. At a college of education, all of the programs that are under our umbrellas, particularly those that are very education-centric. So for example, we have a counseling program at Clemson. It is not under CAPE because they have their own accreditation process. But the key programs that are within the College for Education, for example, the different areas of secondary ed, elementary ed, early childhood, special ed, the literacy program, they're all reviewed by CAPE on a periodic. There's a mid-review that comes every 5 years. There's a huge review that comes every 10 years. And we actually submit information in terms of content, but also data from our participants and from school districts to show that our candidates who have graduated and are now in classrooms, that they are really effective. And I will tell you that has been a challenge to get data, but the schools have worked with us beautifully. But we have to prepare both our goals and objectives for this, but then also we have to be ready with the data to support what we've said we've done and how it is effective. So it's a very self-review as well as self-assessment for teacher preparation. And outside individuals who know these different areas review what we've submitted and give feedback, and we have to address the feedback. Now, this is our year. In fact, I just worked with one of our associate deans in our college to review our overview response for CAPE to take a look at and to review and send feedback. Now, each of the programs are doing their own report and it's submitted. So I reviewed the overview with the data and gave feedback to kind of work with that. But it is our overall assessment program to say, is our college and are our programs doing what we say we're doing, and are we doing it well? And we have to provide the data to convince that we are. And in that way, we are listed as accredited. And that if you have some students who are coming to enroll in our programs, that gives us the distinction of saying, you know, our programs are accredited, we have been reviewed, we have data support that we are of quality. So it's our process for that. Now, the standard piece for this, I would encourage too, because we are pre-K 12 plus in terms of the standards. And this is where I look, particularly with the different revisions, and having this new revision out is extremely helpful. Where are we with the emphasis areas for our curriculum, and how should the learning be guided for our students? And when we get to the what's hot, one of the things that was raised as an issue is the disconnect with curriculum, which is, you know, districts and schools will have their curriculum, the state, as well as, again, these are our national, international standards. So how do you take the curriculum but incorporate good learning processes with that, and also know what you're doing and how you use strategies? These standards really provide the operation of that and the feedback for the direction you should go in the content. So that is the key piece that I think standards have. I've, across my time, and this is not recent, but across my time, it's been interesting to go into different districts and different states and such, and find that curriculum is emphasized in different ways. Hey, good, look at that. Council for the Accreditation of Educator Preparation, yay, I've got my review of CAPE. But I think that, you know, we need to look at the issues and the challenges, and it's worded differently across the different years that we do the standards, in terms of there are going to be some areas that are going to constantly remain strong, but comprehension, vocabulary, all of those different key things may be approached in different ways, and the standards, it's our way of trying to do in a concise form an update to curriculum, update to learning standards that can be best utilized for the classroom. So I think this is part of our answer in how do we best prepare professionals, and it's not by piecemeal, but instead by a total roadmap for this. So I think that will give an absolutely strong overview of some of the key curriculum and learning processes in the classroom. Any other questions? Yeah, okay, CAEP, terrific. Thank you guys for your questions and adding to the chat. This is helpful. Any others? Well, let's move on to the next slide. Now, one of the things that ILA is, I think, as an educator, best known for in my eyes, happens to be our journals. And we have 3 peer-reviewed journals. And I have to brag a bit on the Reading Research Quarterly because it is the gold standard in terms of literacy research. It has also, I'm happy to say that for a few years, we actually were at Clemson. We were the headquarters, the editors were there. Now it's gone on to other places, and that's what happens is that we have different editors at different times, and that really adds to I think, the strength of the journals is because it stays fresh, it stays energized, and it stays relevant. And certainly when we talked about research to practice and the practice back to inform research, the Reading Research Quarterly is the go-to place for that. So if you aren't familiar with this quarterly, and you probably most definitely are, this is the one journal that more than anything that I would like to be sure that you know about, that you see, because this is the go-to place. There's going to be some important information I'm going to share later about some of our events as well as special publications that are coming, and it really comes from the Reading Research Quarterly editors right now. So there's some exciting points for me to share. How do you like my promos for this? I'm actually doing those segues. The Reading Teacher. Now, this is research-based, but it's very much practice-focused for our literacy educators. Anyone who's working with children up to the age of 12, I think, is the best application. The topics are going to focus on curriculum, instruction, and assessment strategies. And it's going to address 2 diverse populations for our literacy learners, and also the reading needs. You're going to see a lot in terms of working not only with the classroom in general, but our struggling readers, etc. So a lot of varied information for that emerging learner that we have here for the Reading Teacher. And then finally, for the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy, we call it JAL for short, but this one is ages 12 and older. Now, one of the items that we've been discussing is that, yes, this has our adolescent learner, but also the adult learner. And while there are aspects of this that will address that adult learner at the post-secondary level, it is probably a little bit less of the adult literacy focus. It's going to focus more on that middle school and high school learner that's there. So, but ages 12 and older. That's been one aspect that we've talked about, is how much more should we focus, what other avenues should we focus on adult learners. So I would be most appreciative for any feedback that you might give for that. But this is really, for me, with an emphasis, and I'm pretty much I will say a K-12. I'm not putting pre-K-12 because I'm not a before kindergarten educator. My background serves me across that K-12, but elementary, middle school, and secondary. And in this last time of my career, I have particularly focused on adolescents. So that JAL journal is absolutely the go-to place for me, working with those middle school and secondary learners. Any questions about the journals? On the next slide then, let's talk about the ILA approach. And this is where I'm going to share with you some of the exciting things that's going on. Of course, you can see the info that's published there in reviewing the research, the latest studies. We develop the resources that are responsive to that and then utilize that to inform others. But here's what's coming that I wanted particularly to share with you. One of the key topics, I'll call it, but it's more than a topic, it's science of reading, is absolutely, sweeping in terms of its coverage for literacy and what should we be doing. Unfortunately, the topic, which should be, in my viewpoint, really a great avenue for discussion and the types of professional conversations that one can have, because we all approach literacy somewhat differently in terms of some of our philosophies and viewpoints. But sometimes with the science of reading, the discussion has been such that we've all seemed to move to our individual camps, so to speak, and we're trying to combat that and trying to do something about opening the conversation and to get clear up any misinformation. So the co-editors of ILA's journal, the Reading Research Quarterly, and it's Amanda Goodwin and Robert Jimenez, they saw a need to look at the issues related to this and to actually kind of facilitate a debate with literacy, science of reading. What does it mean? And what are we talking about in terms of supporting literacy? And they put out a call for submissions for a special issue on the topic of the science of reading. The response was so overwhelming that they're going to have 2 special issues. And the first comes out next month. This is absolutely wonderful. I mean, to have not a battleground of, oh, well, you're right, you're wrong, but to open the conversation so that we can talk about the research, what it means for our classrooms, what it means for the learner. I mean, we can talk about strategies, we can talk about the topics, but if we don't talk about how the learner learns and the different ways in which learners learn and how we can facilitate literacy. I really loved your 2030 plan and what your goals are there. I mean, you're in this conversation too, in terms of what that means and how we can work together. So I hope that you'll access these issues as an ILA member, that you'll join also in this debate and add your info. In fact, I'm going to be asking you some questions at the end that I'm hoping you'll help me to be responsive, so that as I look at writing a piece for Literacy Today that'll come out in November, I want to at least be a little bit there on the conversation to say how we're dealing as states with the challenges that we have in front of us. So the issues that are going to come out via the Reading Research Quarterly, it's going to be an anti or pro science of reading. It's going to be pro research, pro evidence, and pro best practice. So again, I'm excited about that conversation. There's also going to be a special issue from the Literacy Today, which is the magazine that comes out bi-monthly, in which we're also going to have 2 digital events. There's a free webinar with the RRQ editors, and then a 3-hour intensive that you may want to join, looking at how we got to where we are as well as where we need to be going. And these are just 2 ways, again, virtually, for an overall access to anyone, as well as a members only access. And again, others who are not members can do some pay sessions, but there are going to be lots of opportunities for you to be involved, whether you're an ILA member or not. But I think the benefits, you'll quickly see that for the cost of the membership, you get a lot for it, especially in the times we're in. Questions about this topic for the science of reading? All right, so be sure you look out for those special events as well as issues for the science of reading. So on the next slide, all right, this actually shows some of our, they're called position statements, and we also have the literacy briefs. Now on our website, and I gave you the website at the beginning, and I'll share it with you at the end as well. Under resources, it'll actually, the subheading will say position statements. And if you go into position statement, it includes position statements where this is where on different issues or topics that ILA may take a stance and talk about what research says and best practice. But we've also developed something that I think has become equally as important, if not more so, and that happens to be these literacy briefs. They're very relevant current topics. A team of people are involved in, again, reviewing the research and also the connections to classrooms. And those are now, they're digitally put on the website for ILA, so they're easily accessed and current, very relevant for the topics. They have some that have been put up recently in terms of developed and put up for sharing: early reading instruction, independent reading, expanding the canon, and improving digital practices. And one of the position statements that I particularly worked with a team of people was the disability literacy for adolescents. So that is there too. So many topics. Whatever interest or current things that you may want to look at, I highly recommend on the website looking under position statements so that you also get to the briefs. Hopefully they'll add the briefs to the name of that so that you can find it easily, but do remember that. All right, so the next slide. What ILA has tried to do historically, but particularly now, is to be timely, to be relevant, and to be responsive. We are trying very much and are very focused on change. We have been in all, I served as a board member 2010 to 2013, and then I came back on the board as VP 2 years ago. So in the gosh, now almost 6 years that I've been a part of the ILA board of directors, we've constantly looked at change and how change is impacting where we are and what we're doing. So now we have COVID-19. So on the next slide, thanks a bunch. So here's what we're particularly doing in terms of looking at the pandemic and what we need to do to be able to stay strong, to stay supportive, and to still share that professional information that we need to do to support, particularly now, our educators. So, boy, this pushed us into change big time. We were headed, but then suddenly there it was, and we had to make a big decision. And the first one that we really grappled with was our annual conference. You know, and to be, those of you who've been involved with organizations, conferences, that's where you actually raise a lot of your money that actually has part of your organization's, how you accomplish things. So for example, if we're wanting to do new and different resources, you know, we've got people who work on that. So the conference really was our funding piece to be able to do a lot of different things that we're involved with. So when we were talking about canceling our annual conference, that was a big decision, but we did prioritize the health and safety of our members, our volunteer leaders, our staff in doing that. But what we've done is to really address, you know, the piece that says, okay, what are the benefits of membership then? It's not just about going to the conference, you know, annually, but it's much more now we're focusing on the overall professional development. So we've had to re-envision what does a conference mean, and how do we best do that in this pandemic time that really will set the pace for who we become even more digitally. And this is where we're moving away from face-to-face events, as all of us are doing in our different organizations, as we're doing this morning. And so we're utilizing an online platform. Our Literacy Today magazine, it's going to be only accessible in terms of digitally. Our journals will be transitioning there, and that's a bigger, slower moving process, but we're actually speeding the time up for that. EdCamp was utilized to be put online so that literacy educators can connect and talk about their current challenges. And we have a full slate of events that can be accessed digitally. So the pandemic didn't shut down the need for professional development for educators. Again, it really did sort of nudge it forward in a much bigger way. All of us I know that spring, March in particular, for most of us, wow, that was, we were plunged into doing things differently. And I know that from my friends who are teaching online suddenly, there were setups for that. And I'm sure some districts were better prepared than others. But regardless, to move from a face-to-face classroom to an online learning platform, that's big change. That happens to be big change. And the dialogue that we're in now about opening our schools and how does that look and is that safe to do? We're still there in those conversations. So ILA has really we've committed and know that, again, for our educators and the outreach we do, we need to live and breathe virtually. Now, there are going to be some things that we're going to do that will be more hybrid in nature, and people can choose from those. But again, I think that's going to take time even to get back to the point that we feel health-wise safe at. One of the things of just taking the conference in Columbus, which was already set up, I mean, it was ready to roll. If you're looking at March and you're looking at October for the conference, we had to decide by the end of June, where were we going? We needed to be able to work with the folks who were there on the ground in Columbus to know what was taking place. So we had hotels, we had the conference center itself. So those were big decisions, and they had to be made without knowing the future. And I think that's our challenge today, is that we're not sure what September is going to bring. And if you're in my area here, I get together in our cul-de-sac. We have a neighborhood cul-de-sac, and we space ourselves out and actually try to have a conversation with each other. And I bet you can guess the number one update that we do is, has anyone heard about football, right? Everyone's impacted by what happens with our schools, no matter what. The learning, yes, but it's also those other pieces for our schools, which are part of our communities, as you are with your libraries too. This is an important time that we're making, and that's what ILA has tried to address, is we want to make sure that we're there with quality and that we're accessible to help support educators in what we're doing. On the next slide. So some of the digital events, and again, I'm going to particularly talk for a minute about what you see on your screen. And you can see there's where in July we had several meetings, and another one coming up in August for the Planning for Social Emotional Learning in Literacy Instruction. But book access, again, the early reading difficulties, again, improving those outcomes for all. Those have been some of they're free for members in terms of the first one there for that ILA at Home webinar. Again, a free overall event for that book access you'll see. And then a work-anar. I'm not sure how we're going to smoothly pronounce that. But in terms of that one's going to have some aspects that, yes, time, but also give more an integrated interactive session that would take place to try to kind of balance the piece where, this is webinars can be lectures, and that's why I'm stopping and almost forcing you to send me some questions and things, because the engagement, the engagement is important. So I think that we have to be aware of that, is that you can only sit in front of the computer so long and listen to stuff. how can we make it participatory? Now, in general, I wanted to share with you about these digital events. The ILA at home webinars are free for our ILA members. There's another one coming up on August the 30th, Making a Case for Reading Joy with Donald and Miller. But one of the sessions that's actually listed on the homepage for ILA website. There is a session today at 5:30, and it's teaching literacy in turbulent times. So even today, as an ILA member, you can sign in to that session. I think that one should have some really good information to share. All right, and I'm going to take a sip of water while we, we've got about the book Access, terrific. I'm glad the Susan Newman is really terrific, especially for that early learning and the Access, terrific. I'm glad to get feedback there. So on the next slide, now this is going to be interesting, and I cannot tell you yet how this is going to go. I am extremely interested in how we actually do this and the feedback that we get from this. So October the 3rd through the 29th of 2020, ILA Next, it's going to be a professional interactive learning. This is what I'm going to call the workshop multi-week series 1 that we're going to do throughout the year. So we're trying to take what would be an overall that large conference experience one would have, but instead take it and think about engagement, but think about learning across time. So you're going to see that ILA Next becomes our new concept of conference. It's looking at current and emerging needs. It's going to utilize a variety of formats, and it includes this 4-week workshop series that's organized around the age of the learner, and that is included in the registration. So the event is again there to expand your knowledge, to look at high quality literacy instruction through the lenses of distance and hybrid learning. It's going to particularly address equity and access, social emotional development, and trauma responsiveness. I think if anything else, I would have to say that COVID-19 has gotten us to some of the nuts and bolts of what we should be doing to help not the learners, yes, but also our educators, and how do we address it, just as many of you are particularly wanting to know how to best connect with our educators. So on the next slide, I think this is just a finger on the pulse of things, is that we are constantly looking at what are the main issues. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see our, this is our What's Hot in Literacy, our 2020 report. And this is done every other year in terms of doing the survey and then taking the survey and providing feedback for what's hot as well as what's not in many cases. I've sent 2 documents this morning that if you haven't received them yet, you will be receiving them. And you're actually getting the 1-page takeaways, top takeaways from the What's Hot in Literacy report, as well as the full document. So that I think this is extremely informative. So with this particularly, there are top 5 critical issues in literacy education according to this survey. This includes building early literacy skills through a balanced approach that includes both foundational as well as comprehension instruction. Effective instructional strategies for struggling readers is another critical issue area. A third one is increasing equity and opportunity for all learners. The 4th of the top critical issues, increasing professional learning and development opportunity for practicing educators. And then 5, the 5th top issue is providing access to high quality, diverse books and content. So I think that guides a lot of what we are talking here today, particularly about professional development as well as access. So the respondents for this, and I wanted to give you the number, I'm going to look here for a minute in terms of the larger document, but there were 1,443 total respondents. It's a volunteer basis in terms of getting feedback. That feedback came from 65 countries and territories. So the information here should be particularly national, I know, but also with that blend for international too. So it reflects as well our teacher knowledge and effectiveness, and that we need to particularly be supportive of developing that knowledge base and supporting that knowledge base for us to have that equity in education. Another area is that part of the belief from our educators who are responsive is that the role of research is important. And again, this goes back to that preparation, both for our programs at the college level, but as well as ongoing learning for our educators, is that staying abreast of the top research and how that looks in our classrooms and how it works in our classroom to inform. That's extremely important. The other piece that has risen here is that we need to also be more aware of and also supportive of, which also means resources, but that we have digital resources for our educators to access. And wow, is that not a big topic in terms of spring as well? So 98% of our respondents believe that literacy is a fundamental human right, and that 96% believe that all children deserve access to free, high-quality preschool education. And again, I think that the What's Hot report, talk about the pulse. It really is. It puts us to view for the feedback we get, and I would encourage everyone to be responsive when this comes out, because it tries to hear the voices that we're utilizing. I wanted to at least refer the larger document that you have. I just talked there for a minute from the one pager, but one of the things inside the total report on page 17, it talks about the top 2 responsibilities of literacy educators. One we've just talked about now, and that's staying abreast of the latest literacy research. But I also wanted to point out, because I think that we talk about it, but maybe not as focused sometimes, and it's that 91% felt that one of the top 2 responsibilities happened to be the teaching of reading and writing strategies that apply across disciplines. So that content piece, that is so important. Some of the classroom issues, and I'm looking on page 29 of the larger document, I think this is absolutely key in terms of looking at percentage ranking in the top 5 most critical topics for improving literacy outcomes. And on this page in particular, it breaks it out into who the respondents are. So that's going to give you a lot of kind of inside information in terms of teachers, administrators, literacy consultants, as well as higher education professionals, to give you how did each of these think about some of these key issues. And I also look at page 37, and this may be of particular interest to you, where access should be improved. And it's talking about strengthening, and it gives you the data to go with it from the survey. Strengthening classroom libraries, school libraries, non-traditional libraries, home libraries, community libraries, and mobile libraries. And again, I would encourage you, your group and your network group, that this is extremely important. Let's see. Okay, good. So you'll get those 2 documents. I think you're going to find them extremely helpful. And there is so much content in the larger one. I'm only tried to kind of pinpoint a couple of the areas that kind of complement the one pager. But I think you're going to find, in fact, on 37, the value of librarians is a whole section of this in which it's talks about that connection that you're wanting and that you're already asking about for our educator in our educator systems. So look at that, encourage you. One of the things that we've done particularly is to seek input from our librarian group. In fact, that's been part of what I've had some dialogue with the national group, so that the input was there, and we need more of it in our What's Hot topics. So please, especially as those of you who are going to, I hope, join membership-wise to take advantage of the benefits, is that you will give feedback when this comes out, because as I said, every other year. Any
Kathy,
questions?
I just had a couple of follow-up points to that. I believe it was maybe 2-3 years ago, the What's Hot talked a lot about pre-literacy and how parents viewed reading with their babies and some things like that. And it was a really overwhelming number of parents who didn't think that they needed to read to their babies before they were 6 months old. And so like something like that is exactly the area where we as public library staff can help to educate parents and families and encourage them to be reading to baby when baby's still in the womb, let alone when baby is 1 month, 2 months old. So this can be really helpful with some ideas like that. But even looking at this document that's on the screen, just to kind of bring it home to our daily practice. So 70% of the respondents said that there's not enough time in the day set aside for independent reading. What do public libraries do? We encourage independent reading. We create a space for independent reading. This says right here that the kids and the educators want more time for independent reading. So this is the perfect place for us to be stepping in and saying, hey, we can help you create this. We can help you make this a priority. We can help encourage kids and families and parents to create this space for independent reading that is obviously so needed according to this survey.
Absolutely. And in fact, and I'm going back to page 14, and it's the challenges in literacy education. So there is in this larger document a discussion about the independent reading, and that a curriculum at times and assessments seem to push out that independent reading, because where do you put it in the day? Well, it's important to put it in the day. And we know that historically, but we know it currently too. And in terms of the roles for our libraries and librarians, that's where that family piece that you're talking about, which is listed here, let me go back and grab it again. Engaging families in a child's literacy development. Of the respondents here, in terms of identifying the greatest challenges in literacy education, almost half of the respondents listed that as one of the greatest challenges. So engaging, and right below it is again at 42%, building and sustaining a love of reading in students. Now, you've talked about the family connection, especially with early literacy. That is absolutely key. But I also worry about that beyond 4th grade, when the literacy challenges build, where we're moving into a different type of text demands.
Family reading is
the social life of our students, it begins to go down. So I think that as you look at working with families and the young learner, and you're going to hear my bias here, I'm going to encourage you also, what can we do for teachers in the classroom, for our families and communities? What can we do to engage our older learners in literacy? Because it's not just about the disciplinary pieces, it's also about those pleasurable, that reading is something that is a pleasurable, and connections that we just can't give up on past 2nd grade. We've got to continue to look at that. So, and I know you join me that it's not an easy challenge to address, but it has to be in that total piece that we have. So kudos you do, because this is not an easy road that we're all walking. But I think that one of the key things that comes out as kind of at the bottom of the list of things that are important, we all have our different stance about assessment, but assessing students, while important, is the authentic types of assessments so that we know how to better deliver and plan instruction for our students. That's important. But the overall assessments that we are so anxiously preparing for the end of the year and those types of things, those are more detrimental to the love of reading, you know? So I'm just going to tell you, it's not a hot topic when it comes. So you haven't heard me speak about that, but let's just put it on the table, because what you're doing for the love of reading and engaging families, which means the young kids, absolutely. A discussion about that from folks.
Well, we have, when we look at what learning is going to look like this fall, and traditionally libraries have focused a lot on summer reading because kids aren't in school, and so we have this whole big summer reading push. And I really want, and we've talked about this before with my youth services folks, what does reading year round look like? What can we be doing as the public library to be helping with reading year round? It shouldn't just be summer reading. It needs to be fall reading and winter reading and spring reading and all the time reading. So what do we do, to encourage that and work with the schools and work with the school libraries and the literacy coaches and all of these things? And I feel as if, this fall we have such an incredible opportunity to work with kids and families now that they're going to be virtual and all learning is up in the air. Like, this is an opportunity for us to be able to step in and be like, hey, now that everything else is changing, guess what we can also look at? Let's talk about how reading is fun, and let's talk about how we can work more reading in, and let's do the Zoom book clubs, and let's try, the dial a story, and let's just read together, because we know in the libraries, we know professionally that reading together is one of the best ways to encourage learning of any kind. So if you're struggling today with your child in at-home learning with math, sit and read with them instead. They'll still be learning.
And spinning off of that, because I think that what I've been able to access and do a little keep up with has been the array of authors who are reading their works that you can tap in for free and just access that. Now, I'm only scooting across and not trying to collect that to share with others, but whoa, what a resource, because I think that is a piece. But it's also an opportunity here for working with families, and I feel like reading with your students, and this is an opportunity where with our families, it's not about just I'll listen to my child read aloud and I'll do a lot of correction as they do it, and then I'll grill them on. No, not at all. This is a pleasurable event in which the parent or whomever that important family member or friend is, that you can talk about what's being read, that the child, the student, can do that independent silent reading, but still talk about those conversations. I don't want to be in a book club that I get grilled about it, and I don't want to be in a book club where people don't read. So this is an opportunity that, as you know, goodness, I'm speaking to the choir here, that parents can show they read, that they read in many forms, and I love books, but reading takes place in many different ways, and I think we've got an opportunity to build that as well. But talk about resources. In that what's hot, it talks about classroom libraries, but it also talks about our libraries in general and making sure that we fund it. I'm distressed about some things in our state politically, but I feel so strongly that those things that are public need to be supported and the resources there. So that's my general statement I'll make without delving too much into the deep politics of that. And again, I'm going to ask you a question at the end to get your feedback for that. You're so important to those connections. And if we talk about education, and whether I'm part of the health college or whether I'm part of the education college, happens to be our communities, right? Well, you're the pulse of our communities in terms of bringing people in, also providing resources for. So, you know, we're all in this together. That's what when the bottom line is, we're all in this together. And while my presentation may have been about what ILA is doing and changing and have to offer, it really is about all of us working together to try and make a difference. We can't lose a year of learning. You know, we've got to find ways in which we can connect with our students and with our families. It's important. So thank you for what you're doing and for being not only that professional obligation, but I know our hearts for literacy, they're just strong. We have another passion that's there that goes beyond just the professional. It's personal. All right, so let me get my, I think, why don't we move to slide 18? This was a real talk about integrated and a cooperative venture in terms of looking at needing to support our children internationally. It's the Children's Rights to Read, and this had a huge committee that worked to come up with these 10 rights to read. But basically, without going through each one, I'll just say these overview things. That this is about children deserve access to quality education, that they need, again, access for learning opportunities, and they need funded resources in terms of being able to access quality books, etc. And I think that that's where sometimes that I don't know if you've encountered this along the way in terms of that sometimes we get mandates in education. We don't get the funding to go with those mandates. So it's not as strong as if we had the backing for that. And I think now is a time that we have to more than ever push for the equality, but push for the support to be able to accomplish that. So as you read through these 10 fundamental rights, those have been the overview points. But finally, I do want to share that in the second year after the Children's Rights to Read was kind of solidified and brought together, the group then moved on to basically compile an advocacy guide that could inform a practicing educator, which also was informed. Here's where particularly practicing librarians were part of the process in terms of helping to put together that instructional guide. So I hope particularly, I think this Children's Rights to Read, both in terms of the 10 as well as the literacy instruction, this is where librarians truly had a core responsibility in helping us pull this together, not only nationally, but internationally. I think that, go to the next slide, which actually shows the resource. And this is downloadable again. And as we go to 20, there is the website I told you about. And I also, again, want to remind you as you go to the website about the session at 5:30. I want to particularly on that website cover page, homepage, I want you to look under meetings and events, and you're going to be able to tap on that meeting and events and access a calendar of events. I think you're going to find that extremely helpful. Under resources, that's where you're going to find these Children's Rights to Read. the Literacy Today magazine, journals, etc., what's hot. And then if you want to have a look at the ILA officers, executive director, and the board meetings, you can go under About Us, and there's a place for our team. So the one piece, as I'm here in the last 5 minutes, and wow, I cannot believe how fast our time together went. Once we got that GoToMeeting going, it really has gone. Wow. So I just wanted to hear from you. What do you think that we need to do, that others need to do? What does South Carolina need to do to support our education process? So anything that you can, as you have, we just have these last 4 minutes, but any information that you can type up, I'm going to take that information and incorporate in terms of feedback from you. But what should we as a state be doing to support our educators? And you know, I'm thinking here, just like you're thinking, our teachers and our families. That's who I'm thinking of in particular. What should we be doing? What could we do better? What's your feelings, your thoughts, your opinions about, as a state, where we should be active? And if you'll send me your feedback, I want to thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be with you.
Feel free to type in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself if you have any questions or comments.
And Rebecca, as you send out those documents again, would you also include my email so that people can share their insights, and I can again have a conversation and dialogue with members of this group, and I can reflect what we're thinking?
Yes, ma'am, for sure. And I just want to remind folks, if you did not get the documents in an email this morning, let me know. I know I got a bounce back from a couple that said the file was too large. So I'll stick them in a Google document or a Dropbox or something like that and give you access to them that way. I want to reiterate Kathy's comment about the professional development. The stuff that ILA offers is really, really good. Yeah, I think that there is a recording of the book access webinar. I feel like I got one in my email. Sarah, I will double check for that and send that out to everyone. That one, it was a very good webinar.
Yes, yes. They're archiving these so that you can go back in and view them, because that's what I've had to do on many occasions.
They tend to have them later in the evening when I'm like, I really should be done for the day and I'm not going to do any more work, and I'll watch that recording tomorrow. So
yeah. I actually have found that it's actually easier for me to just go into the archive and pull that in my own leisure, my own setting.
And I'll also echo, the fee for being a member for ILA is not ridiculously expensive. So it's definitely something that I would look into. Again, considering the many professional development opportunities coming up this year. I know a lot of you had your training and CE budgets cut. But this is something that I would definitely put towards the top of the list if you're looking at different options. Lot of good stuff. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.